but citizens themselves are always, I cannot say curious, but on alert who is using their data, for what purpose. So instead of having 20 or 200 eyes in data protection agency, instead you have in Estonia 1.3 million people who are monitoring who is using their data, and in Ukraine you have 40 million people. And this is actual power.
Welcome to the Digital Government Podcast. Tune in to discover the future of governance and ways of getting there.
A warm welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Digital Government Podcast with your usual host, Federico Plantera, journalist and researcher, accompanied today by not one but two guests, actually, because we're going to talk about data protection, data tracker, and what Ukraine is doing about it. We're going to discuss it today, first of all, with Yuri Kopyutin, who is a senior expert at eGovernance Academy and the deputy team leader in Ukraine, and also with our very own executive director, Hannes Astok. With both of them, we're going to explore the lessons learned that could be transferable, let's say, not just from Estonia to Ukraine, but overall also for other countries, and how this data protection layer is happening in practice and not just in regulation and legislation in the context of Ukraine. So welcome to my guests in the very first place. Welcome back, Hannes.
Hi, hello.
And welcome back also to Yuri. Yuri, you also have participated already before, so here you are.
Yes, I hear you. Hello.
And let's get right into it with actually diving into kind of like two terms of a spectrum. Maybe we could call them this way, Hannes, because what we're talking about here is exactly that Ukraine is launching a personal data access monitoring subsystem. This is the full name of the whole thing as it is basically taking place in Ukraine. But this new digital mechanism is something that resembles something that Estonia also has, which is the data tracker. And it's a digital mechanism that enables citizens to view who, when, and for what purpose their personal data has been accessed in state registers. To some, this might sound as a little bit too much oversight even. Some might even say, oh, where are we? Is this the Big Brother or something like that? So, Hannes, to first clear out of the way, let's say, these kinds of doubts, how do you think that the monitoring of data access can help citizens control the government or the Big Brother for those who see it this way?
Yes, the data tracker is a great tool, and this is absolutely necessary tool for every government and every society to balance the power of the government. Because when we are building up a digital government, there is an endless number of data queries for various purposes, for various applications, what either citizens are requested or government institutions are initiating to provide various services for the citizens and businesses. And each time when either citizen, him or herself, or government is starting another data exchange, what is collecting various pieces of information from various databases to one application for certain service, when all those queries to various registers are actually logged and through the data tracker, they are made visible for the citizens whose data was used. So now you may ask that why it's needed. It's needed because to avoid any kind of abuse of data and to give for the citizens full control over the situation who is using their data. So this means that citizens have a right to see who was accessing their data and ask the question also, what was the purpose why you were accessing my data? In better case, already in advanced systems, what will be used also in Ukraine, you can see in this list already the query or piece of data what was asked and also the purpose, for what service it was used. It can go down even more automated system that you every time if someone is accessing your data, you are getting a notification, but it might be like a do overwhelming. But in case of Estonia, you can just log into the national portal and go to the data tracker section and open the list of queries from various databases your data was asked. So to summarize, it's really great tool to balance the government with the citizen control. It gives like for the citizens clear control over it, who is accessing their data. And in the case of misuse of the data, government should take steps, either improve the procedures or fire someone who was misusing his or her right to access the data. It's extremely important because without this kind of control, the balance over the use of the data by the government is missing. And this is the critical point here.
Yuri, exactly. Taking over from here and bringing this to Ukraine, exactly, to the specific Ukraine examples. Why did Ukraine then need a dedicated system to monitor the access to personal data? And was there some problem or some issue that required attention that could not be solved by legislation alone? Because, this is a kind of question that also makes me think, could this at all actually be solved by legislation alone? Isn't it better, actually, if there is a tool like this one available for citizens to use?
First of all, I want to say that law cannot solve the issue of trust to digital services, because by law we can prohibit some access to data, but this means that we will lose some comfort of usage of some services, but it will not help to improve trust. And that's why we tried to implement this tool in Ukraine, because really only when we will be transparent with our citizens, in this case, we can show and to receive trust to our services. And that's why we implemented this tool. And also I want to add that this tool is based on Estonian experience, and I hope that it will work fine in Ukraine.
But so when, for example, let's assume that I'm an ordinary Ukrainian citizen. What will actually change for me once that the personal data access monitoring tool is fully launched?
First of all, citizens will be able to see who use their data and for what purposes. And this is the main change, because you can understand what's happened, and the government is not closed to the citizens. People can trust. And first of all, the people can see information about facts of access to their personal data, and they will do this through the DIA mobile application.
One thing that I was wondering that is a bit more of a technical perspective, let's say, type of question. No? I hear and read and say here the word subsystem. Does that tell us anything about how this works in the specific context of Ukraine? The question here is basically, how is this subsystem technically embedded into Trembita? No? How does it become part of Trembita, and why was this the kind of architecture chosen?
Personal data access monitoring subsystem is a part of the Trembita system, and I will try right now to explain why this happens. First of all, our data stored in different government registers. And this data used by different authorities, by different companies to provide services to citizens. And when they try to provide these services, they are trying to receive access to the data which stored in registers. And in Ukraine, they can do this by using the Trembita system. Trembita system, it is a national interoperability solution which allows to receive access to data. And that's why we implemented this personal data access monitoring subsystem in the Trembita, because it is the main place where the data processed.
Hannes, I'm thinking something, that in a sense it's already coming from the Estonian experience in that sense as well. And does a data tracker always come together with a an interoperability framework in place? Meaning, are the two things very much interconnected? Or would it be more complicated, for example, to implement this kind of transparency and trust solution, after all, because that's what we're talking about, in a context where there isn't the same degree of interoperability that we have and we see, for example, in Estonia and in Ukraine?
Yeah, it's a valid question. It's not necessary to build it together with interoperability system. You basically can put data tracker to every data exchange system what you have. It could be like one-to-one connections between the institutions, but definitely to build it in the way that it follows and tracks all the one-to-one connections between the institutions, it's pretty hard task technically. And to make sure that actually every connection is covered. Or another option, you can put it on the front of every database and log the queries and get the information there. So it's not technically related to X-Road or Trembita only. It's a concept what could be used in every society, whatever technical solutions they are using. But the main thing is that it should exist. You need to know who is using your data. It's not the monopoly of a government to use your data. It's your data. You own it. And you need to know who is using it.
Do you think that this has been one of the main lessons learned, basically, from the Estonian experience that go into the practice of data protection that is being built in Ukraine? Hannes, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's data protection by citizens themselves, or monitoring data protection, because you can imagine that you can build however big data protection agency for one or another country, but they cannot monitor all the connections, all the questions and legal background of them. But citizens themselves are always, I cannot say curious, but on alert who is using their data, for what purpose. So instead of having 20 or 200 eyes in data protection agency, instead you have in Estonia 1.3 million people who are monitoring who is using their data, and in Ukraine you have 40 million people who are monitoring who is using their data. And this is actual power.
Yeah, beautiful point to render it also with the numbers, with the actual population numbers. And Yuri, then to get back to the very practical aspect of it, no? So what is basically the information that as a user I could check on this data tracker tool? Meaning, what exactly is logged when someone accesses personal data? Is it the institution, the official, the time? What is it? And next to this, what are the options for a citizen if they believe that access to their data was unjustified or suspicious?
When we talked about recorded data, first of all, I want to say that this tool recorded the transaction ID, data and time of transaction, the information about organizations that requested the data, the information about organizations that provided the data. Also, it recorded the information about registry from which data received. Also, people can see information about purposes of usage of this data, and also about employees who used this data. In some cases, I need to say, because some transactions are fully automatic, and only when people asked this data. In this case, we can see information about employees. And about the second question, about options, what people can do, first of all, they need to contact the authority or authorities which processed this data, and to ask from them why they process this data. If the answer will be not okay and people will not be satisfied, in this case, they can contact the Office of Ombudsman of Ukraine and can ask from this office, please help me to understand what's happened, maybe something wrong or it's okay.
I think Estonian experience initially was also that people only saw that this or another institution was using their data. Now we have updated the data tracker, and also the purpose is visible, because in many cases people even don't know that for what purpose their data could be used as a background check, or let's say ownership check. If you live in one or another house, if something is related to this house and you own the house or part of the house, your data might be checked also. So more we provide explanations already in the data tracker for the citizens in automated manner, actually we reduce the burden of a government later to respond to the queries of a citizen. So if I can read that this was used for this service, for this purpose, so they understand, they don't call you. But if I show only that, let's say, Tartu city government was using my data or Ministry of Education was using my data, I cannot connect it to any service immediately in this certain day or date. And when I'm sending a request, they must respond. So better it's automated, better it's described in a human manner so citizens can immediately understand as more successful the service is actually.
And Hannes, in this case, we've been talking about the citizen side of the equation, let's say, and then also in terms of government as organizations. But if we were to focus instead on public officials specifically and the people working in government agencies and in these organizations, then what kind of, I would say maybe even like behavioral change, let's say, should Ukraine expect among public servants once that they know that basically every access is logged and visible?
I think the behavioral change is that if government officials actually understood that whatever you are doing in national databases, whatever data you are searching, it's tracked and made visible for the data owners, this means that you are much more careful. It doesn't mean that you need to limit your searches if it's legal. But you must understand that you cannot do any search what is not related directly to your work and direct task what you have. What it means that, let's take a sample of tax authority. It's clear that tax authority must have access to databases to verify the incomes of the citizens and are all taxes paid and so on. But it must be traced down inside also internal systems of a tax authority that if a tax officer is investigating one or another case, he or she can only access the data what is related to this case. He cannot just access data of his or her neighbor just to look out of curiosity where from this guy was getting so much money that he is buying a new car. So it should be clearly connected to the work he or she is doing. The same like in hospitals. Doctors definitely can access the data of the patients he or she is treating. But he or she cannot access the data of celebrity who is at the same hospital and just out of curiosity take a look why this celebrity person was taken or politician was taken to the hospital. Only his or her doctors can access this person's data. This should be the model. Definitely, if I can see that from a data tracker that hospital X was accessing my data, this is fine for me, it's sufficient. But internally in the hospital there should be more detailed systems. So if I'm asking why you are accessing my data, they must be traced down to the doctor or nurse or any other hospital staff member who was actually doing it and what was the purpose. If it's just anonymous hospital and no one cannot track down who it was actually, then it's not helping.
Perfect. Yuri, in this sense, I think that this raises also another question of maybe partly technical, partly human nature, actually. Exactly about basically data is accessed in the back end, let's put it this way. So, for example, we've talked about the subsystem, but how does the system also distinguish between legitimate automated technical requests, for example, that needs to be happening there and all is good. And instead, for example, access that is initiated by a specific official.
When we talked about this subsystem, it really locked all requests to the system, to the registers, and this do fully automatic. And when we talked about transactions, some transactions are fully automatic. And in this case, we will not provide the automatic notification to the citizens, because if we will send all notifications to the citizens, we can spam them and it will be not comfortable to user of application. What we will do in critical cases, for example, if we have some changes of properties or something else, in this case, citizens will receive the push notifications and will understand immediately that something happens with their property rights or something else. And in general, I want to say that near 50% of all transactions are fully automatic. That's why for the biggest case, we will have the same schema like in Estonia, that in Estonia people can see information through the portal. In Ukraine, we can see through the mobile application. And in mobile application, we have the special place where people can find information about all transactions, but notifications will be available only for critical cases.
Okay, the specification is very important also for listeners to know and be aware that exactly it's not that as long as you have the on your phone, then you're gonna be spammed with notifications whenever someone is checking your data, but for specific cases that obviously are sensitive, either in terms of the type of data that is being accessed or in terms of the type of access, let's say, that is happening. But Yuri, and obviously this is not something that happens overnight, in the sense that the data tracking tool has been in progress for some time, I would say. And now we are basically at the situation where hundreds of public institutions are preparing to connect to this subsystem. This preparation, no, what does it involve in practical and technical terms? And also, and this is a very important question, I would say, this kind of engagement, the connection, let's say, between a government agency to the tool, is it voluntary or how does it work in your case?
I will start from the second question. This tool is mandatory. If you plan to process the personal data in the Chembita system, you need to use the personal data access monitoring subsystem. We have some exceptions for some security points, and during the investigation process, in this case, this tool will not be used. But in all other cases, this tool must be used mandatory. And when we talked about the preparation to launch the system, this process will not be implemented immediately because authorities need to do some actions. And when we talked about these actions, for example, owner of registers, they need to install some components from personal data access monitoring subsystem. They need to publish services on these components. They need to set up the features of automatic monitoring of transactions in these components. When we talked about the consumers, they also need to do some things. Mainly, they need to modify existing web services. They need to add some technical information, some technical headers, which will allow to monitor the information. From technical things, that's all. But also I want to say that some points authorities also need to do in legal level. They need to update contracts on data exchange. They need to add information about purpose of exchange of personal data. If shortly, that's all.
I think that this really solidifies, and especially the first thing you said in this response, which is that connecting to if you are processing data and personal data and sensitive data, then it is mandatory to be connected to the subsystem. I think that this is exactly the thing that is referred to when we talk about trust or transparency by design, which means obviously trust and transparency by default. This is actually something that that we see in European regulation, for example, in the intentions and effects of the GDPR regulation, but as well just as being like some components that are part of a certain way of thinking of data, looking at citizens' data, incorporating, embedding this element of trust and transparency in the way that we handle data, which is a core like European standard in this sense, like data access transparency. And I think it's good to remark it because it is not something actually to take for granted or as a given also in other places of the world, for example. So Yuri, in this sense, how does Ukraine's approach align, let's say, with GDPR in practice? Because that's what it sounds like, no?
It's really great question, and I want to say that really when we designed this solution, we based on GDPR. And first of all, we analyzed our Ukrainian law on personal data protection together with GDPR. And based on this, we prepared the technical specification for this tool. And what I want to say is that all principles have been implemented. I mean GDPR principles, I mean article file of GDPR, which consists of core 7 principles, and all these principles implemented. By these principles, I mean purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, and some other principles. And all these principles implemented in this tool. And I think this tool will help in future to Ukraine to implement all legal changes which is necessary according to EU integration process of Ukraine.
I will for sure reference a link to the Article 5 of GDPR in the blog that we attach to this podcast as usual, because exactly already if we read only the first of those that you were mentioning, Yuri, then we have that personal data shall be processed lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner in relation to the data subject. So there is still the focus on the person because this is in relation to the data subject. And Hannes, I would turn to you at this point with what is the last question basically of this podcast episode. And I would say that maybe we could do a little bit of a flash forward, looking ahead. So if we were to look 5 years into the future, let's say that it's Ukraine 2030, how should systems like this, for example, shape trust between Ukrainians and the state? What is the impact that this can have there, based also on the impact that we have seen tools like this have in Estonia?
It's definitely up to Ukrainian citizens and Ukrainian government to decide what they want. But what I can forecast based on Estonian experience, that if this data tracker is successfully implemented, so we can see very positive results. So most probably the number of illegal queries is diminishing remarkably. Secondly, probably there will be a couple of public cases when citizens has mentioned and notified the government that their data was used illegally or non-intentionally, let's say. And there will be some public cases that someone is fired because of it. I don't know who they are, but I suspect that something like this will happen if the Ukrainian government is taking this kind of thing seriously, and I'm sure they are taking. So, and the third point will be that of awareness and understanding what is data protection actually, why it's important and how it's actually functioning, is much more higher both on the citizens and on the government official side. So both of them are taking it much more seriously. What is the intention of a data tracker also?
And also it definitely brings to reality the principle of that when maybe these cases or like cases of misuse will happen, instead of obviously limiting ourselves to simply say, look, some misuse has happened, we could actually be in the position of saying, Some
We
misuse
don't
has
tolerate.
happened. Yeah,
we
exactly.
can say we don't tolerate it.
Exactly. Some misuse has happened. We were able to see it, and we are also, because we are prepared for it, in the position to do something about it. Thanks a lot to my guests for today's episode. I will say hi to you actually one by one. So Yuri, first of all with you, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you for this meeting.
And Hannes, also thanks to you for joining again an episode of the podcast.
Thank you very much to all our listeners globally.
Exactly. Thank you to everyone and wherever you are. And thanks for tuning again to another episode of the Digital Government Podcast. And that's it for today, also from your usual host. I will see you all at the next one.
This podcast is brought to you by the eGovernance Academy. Tune in next time.